and welcome to today's Thrive Programme podcast. Today we've got a lovely lady called Chloe Tunnicliffe who is going to talk about the parent side of having an anxious child, because I think a lot of the resources, or certainly Chloe can say that you found that a lot of the resources we have help a parent to understand what to do with a child from the child's point of view. But what you felt was a bit more lacking was, what the hell do I do as a parent? So do you want to just give us a super quick intro? I know we're not going to dwell on it because you're like, just cut to the chase. When I was there, I just wanted to know the facts, but just to position it would be lovely.
Okay, so I came to the Thrive programme to help my daughter with emetophobia and a whole host of other anxieties that it transpired. And during the early stages of it, I was very much focusing on helping her to get the most out of it. But in doing that, I was creating quite a lot of anxiety myself and having started to have panic attacks. And I now know why that was. And I really want to try and help parents who might be feeling similarly with an anxious child, thinking about it 24/7, which we in Thrive call brooding, how checking in on your self-esteem and seeing what tips we can give you to help you on your way.
Fab. So this podcast is for you if you are currently parenting a child that's a bit anxious, or maybe very anxious with emetophobia. It's off the scale anxious, lots of avoidance and things like that. But really anybody that's struggling at the moment with a child that's struggling a bit emotionally. And you've put together from your experience sort of 4 key things that, if you know, in hindsight, these were the key things that helped you to navigate that point and I guess make it easier for your child. So let's dive in. What's the first thing that you think is important?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is learn to thrive yourself, whether that be going through the manual or with a coach. Really read the manual with yourself in mind rather than your child. And it's, of course, you've probably come to the Thrive program because your child is anxious. So therefore it's natural that your focus be on them. But actually, when you start putting the Thrive components together for yourself, the whole process will become easier. And I really went through this the wrong way and then the right way. And when I was parenting, before I was thriving, I was still parenting with so much love, so much care, so much effort, believing that I was doing everything I could to help my daughter. But I really was struggling. And then I learned to thrive. And I was still showing up and being there with all the love and all the care and all the effort that I was before. But the difference was that I was feeling so much more in control of my emotions, the situation, the way I was processing the experience of it all was far more positive. And a thing that we're going to discuss in the podcast is the pressure that I was putting on myself in so many different areas to help her get to where I wanted her to be was huge. And then therefore I was putting a lot of pressure on her, which, as an emetophobe or an anxious child or anyone who's anxious, we know that there is pressure there. And so when they're looking up to someone for support and they're seeing how pressurized that person feels, it's going to make them feel worse. And that's sort of the cycle that we're in. So go through the manual and really go through the actions yourself, even if, because your child may not want to be engaging in the program as much as you do. So, for example, if you're an adult and you want to learn to thrive or get over your fears or phobias, you've probably hit a point where you go, I don't want to be like this anymore. I want to make some change. Whereas when you are a child, you're just going along. You are quite happy putting in all your safety seeking behaviors. You're doing all those things. You feel okay. It's your parent that wants things to move on, and they're seeing how you could be living. Um, so I would just say, as a parent, learn to thrive yourself, model some amazing things that you will learn to do whilst going through the program, and then you will start to see changes happen.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think a lot of families come to us with anxious children, and obviously just want, understandably, that child to not feel so
Yeah.
anxious. And us being those lovely, caring, nurturing, protective parents, we want just our childs to be
Mm.
fixed. But actually, like you say, you can't directly control the effort that your child, you can motivate and you can nag, and sometimes that has the opposite effect.
Yeah, yeah.
But what you can control is your understanding of things, your understanding of the psychology, of the way our minds work, of emotional control, of self-esteem. When you've got that for yourself,
Mhm.
it's much easier then, isn't it, to parent the ups and downs of children, whether they're engaged in doing the course themselves or not. And would you say, when you were focusing on your daughter, did you made more progress when you sort of stopped doing that
Oh,
and still guided her in that, but
yeah.
focused much more on you?
Hugely. And it does seem a bit counterintuitive. You're
Mm.
wanting to support your child, and to then suddenly take the focus away slightly from them and put it on you, it doesn't seem natural. But it helps so much because you're modeling this to them. And we will dive into it more, but they will start to see your responses to things. And when you start learning to thrive, your mindset has changed, your language changes, your whole being changes. And so when you're talking to your child, it's coming across in a completely different way. They know you better than they better than you think they do. And they know when you're just pretending. They know when you're saying, "Oh, you did really well," but they know that look on your face that you're thinking, "But why are you not doing more?" That kind of thing. So when your whole demeanor changes, they see it and they
Yeah.
notice it. And I don't think I realized quite how powerful that could be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of the time your parents don't think that, and may well not be anxious in areas of their life, right? You can have often parents who don't have fears, don't have phobias, don't have the anxieties that they see it in their children,
Mm.
but they probably feel quite powerless and helpless around how to help their child
Mhm.
navigate that, because none of us are taught this kind of stuff in
Yeah,
school. So
absolutely.
even if it's just accepting, look, I don't know how to best parent an anxious child. For
Mhm.
that reason, I'm going to get myself and understand emotions and self-esteem. And if I understand the components of what's driving this anxiety, then it's going to make it much easier for me to have perspective if they have a wobble, or
Mm.
to see this fear or anxiety in a more powerful way, that it's an easy thing to fix, rather than this
Yes.
great big thing that nobody's been able to help us with yet.
Yeah. And I think also, well, certainly for me, because I had been anxious for many years in different ways, um, I thought and felt that the tools and the skills I had picked up through therapy and CBT throughout my adult life, that I could just carry on doing that and it
Mm.
would work. But actually that was quite confusing, because I realized that I was actually putting some of my methods in on her, which actually kind of contradicted some of the Thrive stuff. So when I
Mm.
actually um started applying the Thrive program, it all made sense, it all fitted together, it all worked, and we're singing from the same song sheet, really.
Yes, yes. I think it's easy, isn't it? Some of the coping mechanisms that society sort of teaches us, like, well, you got your breathing techniques and
Mm.
things, yes, that's helpful, but it ideally we want them to not be creating that anxiety in the first
Yeah.
place, to need to focus on the, so it's a
Mhm.
different sort of
It
approach,
is
isn't it?
different. Yeah.
Fab. Okay, so step number one, focus on you to
Yes.
begin with,
Yeah.
and then that gives you the understanding to be able to better help a child, whether they're
Absolutely.
doing the course or not. Fab.
Yes.
What's number two?
So, number 2, I want to talk about pressure, because, well, I've been thinking about this, and there is so much pressure on that we as a parent create. And I think that, well, from my point of view, it was really from the start of becoming a parent. And if you are a natural people pleaser, you become a parent, and suddenly you've not only trying to please others, you're trying to get someone else to please others too. So that there's pressure as a parent, pressure as a parent to an anxious child, pressure that we put on ourselves when we have an anxious child sibling that or siblings that we're trying to parent. So you've got your anxious child, but then you've also got your non-anxious children potentially, and how are you meant to navigate that? And then the pressure that we are the pressure that our children, our anxious child, is putting on themselves, and then you are, without realizing, adding more pressure onto that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
So
being aware that you're putting pressure or feeling pressured, how did you change that? How did you know what did you do to take the pressure off?
So I noticed that it was actually after certain events where I had felt that we had to do those things. And then afterwards, feeling this relief, and then realizing quite how much pressure I had been putting on myself to get my anxious child to, certain events and things like that. So then I really stopped to question where that pressure, where I was creating it from, what thinking styles, what I was doing. I noticed personally myself, it came quite a bit from social pressures that I imagined to be there. So that could be, if I mean, going back quite a few years, pressure that if your child has been invited to a party and they don't want to go to the party, but you feel, well, they've been invited to the party, and how will that other parent view me if my child doesn't attend? They've taken up a space maybe. Or how will my child's friend feel if they don't turn up? And all of a sudden you're putting quite a bit of pressure on yourself, and then that comes through to your child. You start saying things, or I started saying things like, well, you don't want to let them down, do you? And they'll be waiting for you, and you just you maybe you're just doing this because you don't want to let people down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so just identifying where you may be putting social pressures. Are you feeling that members of staff might be judging you and your parenting? Are you putting pressure on yourself because you're running late for work? These kinds of things that could just be happening. First of all, identify them
Mm.
and what impact that might be having on your child. And then
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's true, isn't it? So taking the pressure off, identifying it, being aware of it to begin with, and then actively checking in with yourself so that you
Yeah.
can have a little word with yourself, drop some of the balls that you've been juggling, drop some of the plates that you've been spinning. So relaxing some of that, taking the pressure off and proving to yourself nothing happens. And actually, does anyone judge you? Does it even
Mhm.
matter? Do you care if anyone judges you because your child's the anxious one at the school gates and everyone else is,
Mhm.
again, you're looking for that evidence
Mhm.
that everyone else is skipping in happily and yours is the one that's
Yeah,
clinging
absolutely.
on, right? It's not helpful, it's not true, it's a habit of thinking.
Absolutely. And this was a habit of thinking that I was in, and my child was consequently copying that habit, feeling a huge amount of pressure to do things, to not let me down, because without me realizing, she could
Mm.
see that it was having an impact on me. So once I started to remove the pressure and actually work on what we could do, and really change it, that it doesn't matter if we're late for this party. It doesn't matter if we're late for the party. Let's not worry about it. Let's just see how we go. And if we turn up brilliant. You'll have a nice time. And if you don't, we'll learn from it. Or even if we just arrive to say hello and happy birthday, that is brilliant. Let's do that. And just, it's a whole different approach to it. And then suddenly you go, oh yeah, I can do this. And they go, oh yeah, I can do this. And things just start to improve. And it's the same with school. If they're creating fear about school because they might have a match or something that they feel uncomfortable with, well, it doesn't matter. Just see what you can do. And again, it seems so counterintuitive. You want to be saying, no, you can do it, and you are still saying that. But if you take that pressure away, you feel lighter. You feel lighter, they feel lighter, and things start to happen. And it took me quite a long time to realize this. But when I started really practicing it with myself, taking that pressure off, in lots of different areas of my life, and then putting it into practice as a parent, it really did help. And actually far more was achieved from doing that. Because when you are anxious, and when your child is anxious, and I mean, if emetophobia comes into it, there is a lot of perfectionism, and there is therefore a lot of pressure that is put on them. So you don't want to be adding to that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost the opposite of desiring control over their emotions, isn't it? Desiring control over what time we get to the party,
Mhm.
and actually just accepting, yeah, we might be late, letting them feel a bit anxious,
Mhm.
letting them feel a bit worried in school about the match. But by letting them, you're trusting them, you're putting your belief in them, you're saying, you can handle this, darling. I know you've got this. You can
Yeah,
get yourself through it. It's
yeah.
it's everything that they need to start to overcome it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, there were even pressures in things, for example, regarding food. I remember there was one situation where we were in a restaurant, and I noticed my daughter didn't want to eat anything, and which wasn't that uncommon. But when I dug a bit deeper, I realized it was because that she was putting pressure on herself, that if she ordered something and then didn't eat the rest of it, didn't eat it, then what would we think of her?
Mm, mm,
So, I mean, this was probably one of the early things I sort of noticed, and then started practicing and putting it in many other areas. So I said, it does not matter. Let's just order it and see how it goes. Like, it just, don't worry about that. Just ordering it is great. And we ordered it, and she ate it all because that pressure was removed. And it's just when you see things like that, you go, wow, this is holding her back, and
yeah.
also it's been holding me back.
Yeah, but like you say, it's that it does feel like the opposite of what you want to do for a
Yeah.
little while until you realise, oh, it's much easier doing it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And when our children don't want to go places and are avoiding, it is the natural thing to want them to do the opposite of avoid. But there is this big gap in between, and they can do a bit of it and
Mm,
then process it well, which
mm,
is another thing that is really important to
yeah,
discuss, the
yeah.
processing of things.
Yes, nice. Okay, cool. Well, that takes us nicely on. So that was your tip number 3, wasn't it? That you, on reflection, thought that was one of the big shifts in
Yeah.
your family's journey.
Yes.
So what's number 3?
Yes. So processing. Now, throughout the Thrive program, you are encouraged to process things correctly. But what does that actually mean? Now, we are processing things all day, every day, and we're processing our experiences. So this isn't new work. This is something you're doing already. It's just checking that you're doing it in the helpful way rather than the habitual unhelpful way, which I was doing. And that's really looking at everything that you have done well or better compared to processing things of what you haven't done. So taking a step aside from, as a parent, just me myself, how was I processing things? Well, I was very much in the habit of processing all the things I hadn't achieved in a day. I don't think I ever looked at my day and thought, oh, I did that really well. And look at all this stuff I've done. Never. It was, oh, I haven't done this. I haven't done that. Oh, guilt coming in, all that kind of thing. Because no one had ever shown me the skills of how to do it the other way. And so when you start really practicing processing things helpfully as an individual, then your two things are going to happen. You're going to model processing things well to your child, but then you're also going to start modeling, not modeling, you're going to start processing how their day is going. So when you have an anxious child and you have panics, avoidance, just the difficulties that having an anxious child can present to a family, if you are always looking at what went wrong rather than what went right, it's going to be a hard journey for you, a harder journey for you. And also, it means that when another occasion comes along, you won't be feeling empowered and positive about it. So, processing things helpfully can be just such a game changer.
Yeah. So when we say processing, so we're talking in chapter 4 at the end, which is around self-esteem. There's a little exercise where we learn this skill. We teach people this skill about how to, when we say processing, we mean how to think about your day, your life, your effort levels, your achievements, your mistakes, your learnings, how to think about all of that stuff in a helpful way, in a powerful way, in a thrivey way, so that we don't dwell on the negatives, but we're very much celebrating the positives. We're, learning from the mishaps and the things that we could do better, but we're not beating ourselves up about that. We're not making ourselves feel guilty. We're not brooding about the fact we've got an anxious child and I must be this, that, and the other mum. Kind of training ourselves to see ourselves in a, through the eyes of somebody that cares about us and is understandable and compassionate. It's training yourself to think in that way about yourself.
Yes, definitely. And I think looking back, I was processing things, so let's say we had spent quite a few hours getting to school, and then she went to school. I would then come away, and probably because I've been putting pressure on myself, processing it, all the things that had gone wrong. And I would tag on the end, but she went. But it was more, my focus was on what hadn't gone right, and then actually what that meant was I would then beat myself up about it.
Because we're fixers, aren't we? A lot of us are doers. We're fixers, so we want to, the brain is sort of wired to built in for safety, built in with a bit of a negative bias. So of course it's easy to think about, well, I should have done that differently, and I shouldn't have said that thing, and we should have put the clothes out ready, because and look at all the things that, rather than actually going, right, maybe we'll try that tomorrow, but actually it's brilliant that she's gone. It was quicker than last week. On average it's getting a bit easier, we're learning. Or even if there's been a big wobble, in a way, it's no bad thing. It's like a good thing, because you can figure out, well, what was driving that wobble? What haven't we quite learnt yet? Or what belief has been, like you said, the food thing was the pressure about the money and spend, and what if I don't eat it? Well, it's good that you've got that, because you can straight away, you can get rid of that.
Yes, absolutely. So I would suggest to parents to really think where in their day, not about their child, about them, where are they processing things currently in a less helpful way than they could be, and really identify those areas, and then start practicing as much as possible, putting a positive slant on and looking at what you have done. I use the analogy that if you in the dark and you've got a head torch on, if you're looking in one direction, you're not going to see what's in the other direction. But so if you're looking at the negatives and what you haven't done, you're not going to see what you have done. So just shift your head torch to shine a light on what you have done. And then by practicing that, you're gonna start doing it in other areas of your life, and your child will hear it too. If they can hear every so often, or well, as often as possible as well, that today I'm really pleased with myself. I did all this stuff, and then end it there. They're gonna go, oh, and rather than hearing you, well, in my case it was probably under my breath, oh, I didn't do that, oh, I still
Yeah.
need to do that, oh, and they pick up on it. They pick up on it, unfortunately. And that is just our habit that we're doing. We're not doing anything wrong, it's just that's what we're in the habit of doing. But it's knowing that that habit can be changed, and it has a really positive impact on your anxious child.
Yeah. Better impact on you, better impact on family life,
Absolutely.
and better impact that they're learning exactly the same. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, so learning to process things more helpfully. So that means just taking a little bit of time, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you've got, either throughout the day or at the end of the day, just to go, right, got that done, sorted that out. That wasn't the end of the world. Bounced back from that pretty quickly. That's a good thing. And
Yeah.
it helps if you're looking at other stuff and not just staring tunnel vision at your anxious child and they're not in school at the moment. Actually, it puts that into perspective because, you know, in the scheme of that's one thing in your life, but you've also got job, relationship, hobbies, other things, the other child, the dog, you know, other stuff going on. It just gives you a bit more perspective rather than feeling like you've got to just focus on one thing all the time.
Absolutely. And if you are taking that pressure off yourself and you are processing things more powerfully and helpfully, you are actually going to find yourself feeling more comfortable about doing stuff for you, which is a really positive thing, because when your child is anxious and it's taking up it feels like it's taking up so much headspace. You can get in the habit of just becoming consumed in this and forgetting all about you,
Yeah.
and that isn't actually helpful to you or your child. It feels like it is because you're putting in all your energy, and that's what brooding is. It's giving us this illusion that we're problem solving and we're helping, but it isn't. And so remove that pressure, process it really well, and then you're gonna feel better. And another thing is that when you are helping your child, if you have been thinking, oh, this has gone wrong, or she's struggling there, or he's struggling there, and if your self-esteem isn't where it could be, um, you're gonna feel negative about yourself. But how about just saying, actually, today I've listened to a podcast about how to help my anxious child. That's really good. I didn't have to do that. I'm a caring parent doing that. I'm putting the effort in. Just my point being is that just by listening to something like this, that's something you can process as being a really positive thing that you've done today, and help you to feel good about yourself as a parent.
Yeah. Oh, that not good enough thing again, isn't it? It's very easy to load this in on top of all the other experience we might have banked in
Yeah,
our times
yeah,
about not feeling
definitely.
good enough. But
Yeah,
if you know, I think sometimes looking, if it was somebody else, if it was your best friend who had a bit of an anxious kid at the moment, you wouldn't be thinking, oh my gosh, what is that pair, you know, you'd be like,
thank you, isn't.
Jeepers, do you want me to come around with some wine? What do you need? You know, it's like
I know.
you've got
Yeah,
all the compassion and love and support in the world. So look at yourself in the same way and think, look, I don't need to judge myself for this. This is just a little minor bump in the road that we can
exactly.
iron out.
Exactly. And it won't last forever. It really won't. This it will be all okay.
Yeah. Good. So one final thing then. What's the last piece of advice that you have for parents with an anxious child?
Um, so how to respond in a panic attack, or as we call them in Thrive, a blip. Um, so a blip is when, and a panic attack is when you have lost perspective on the situation, and it can take some time to regain that perspective. And as a parent, you want to be remaining calm, but Sorry. As I don't know if you could hear the fan on my computer then. Um, as a parent, you want to be remaining calm, but that can seem a little easier said than done when you are applying all the pressure to yourself and you feeling this is just another thing to deal with, that social anxiety, that low self-esteem. How can you always feel calm? Sometimes that feels like that. So what I would suggest is, if you have been working on taking that pressure off and processing things really powerfully, in that moment where they're having a panic, to really understand that during that panic, your child is terrified. They are terrified, as in there are armed gunmen storming the house and they are fearing their life. That is how it feels. So even though the threat isn't real, the feelings are. So as a parent, particularly if you're feeling stressed yourself, you might want to, if you've got to get out the house or board that flight or get to work, you may wish to try and over control the situation and go in with, well, why are you not using your learnings from Thrive? Why are you not doing this kind of thing? That is just going to fall on deaf ears because your child is dealing with real terror in that moment. So what my advice would be is take a step back, take a step away if it's possible, and really focus on making sure that you are calm, and talking to yourself in a kind, compassionate way, reminding yourself that, well, all the things that you can learn in Thrive. And once you've done that, just tolerate the discomfort that they are panicking and that you're not getting to where you're going, and wait for the blip to pass, and then put into practice all your processing work that you've been doing, and process it in the best way possible. And that is by saying to them, it's okay, it's done. What are we going to learn from it? How are we going to move forward with this? What can we change so that this doesn't happen, because it's not making you feel good? And so what can we learn from it?
Yeah.
And when, as a parent, parenting an anxious child, I started to do that, it meant that suddenly these blips and these panics, which had seemed so big and daunting to me as a parent, suddenly were brilliant. What have we learned from this? What can we get from this? What step forward are we going to get from this? And when you, as a parent, start feeling like that, you do edge them out of their comfort zone more and more and more, because you go, it's going to be okay, we're going to learn from this. And so that's been a really big learning for me, that I really hope can help somebody else.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because, like you say, it's sometimes you're sort of got other pressures on you. But
Oh yeah.
if you think about in that moment, really the only thing that matters is teaching your child how to navigate this big emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think when I work with adult, particularly the more anxious people with health anxiety or OCD or emetophobia, people, you go back and you say, right, when did all this start, and when did you sort of create this belief and things? A lot of them had parents or adults around them who were a bit dismissive
Mm-hmm.
of those fear, that fear you have when you're age 7 and you're scared of the bogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
That, like you say, we know as adults there's no such thing. It's overreaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the child genuinely feels that fear. So as
Yeah.
much as it's not a real threat, as you said, the fear is real. So to help them to manage that fear, if you could, I know it's like there is loads of other shit that we should be doing, could be doing, but in that moment, none of that matters.
No.
The only thing that matters is showing my child this is safe, it sucks, but it's okay. We can ride the wave.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need to fuel it anymore.
Yeah.
We will calm down. Actually, when they've calmed themselves down, we celebrate the fact that they've calmed themselves down and that whatever they were scared of didn't happen, and we help them process it in that way. That's how we equip them with coping
Yeah.
skills, with that knowledge, with that confidence, with, even though that felt really scary, you were safe,
Yeah.
even with that scary feeling. And actually, I wish I had that at school. I was talking to someone before this at the age of 5 who started panicking. If you had a teacher in school who said, it's okay, Luce, it's horrible to feel really anxious in the middle of maths, but you can, sit with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing, it feels scary, but that you're not in danger. It's a horrible feeling. Your body's doing all sorts of funny things at the moment. Your heart, teach them what that looks like, what that feels like, but say, we don't have to run away. We
Yeah.
just let it be there, and then we calm ourselves down, and then we can have a good look at what we were thinking to sort of create that in the first place. But come and tell me at the end of maths, once you feel
Yeah.
a bit calmer, once you've got that from an 8 out of 10 down to a 3, put your hand up, come and tell. Imagine if we'd have had that. And
Exactly.
then you get
Exactly.
given a little hug or a gold star for, you know, managing that rather
Yes.
than running away.
Yeah.
It would make a huge thing. But that's essentially what we're teaching that child in that moment.
Exactly. And going back to my original point about going through the actions of the program yourself, um, that will equip you so that you actually can do those things, that you can sit with that discomfort of your child panicking
Mm.
and all of the things that might be popping into your head about that, well, why I'm going to be late, or what does this say about me? What does this say about them? All those unhelpful thoughts, they won't be there. They just won't be there. And also, if there is a tiny glimmer of them, you will have practiced tolerating that feeling of discomfort and knowing that it will pass and lessons will be learned from it.
Yeah. And it's hard, isn't it? But the calmer you are and the less
Mm,
flustered you are, you've got a child who is emotionally up and down and doesn't feel very powerful over how they feel. The last thing they need is an adult who doesn't feel very powerful over how they feel and sort of assumes that panic station and that emotional state that the
mm,
child is in. Whereas if you've got an adult who can, obviously empathize and feel and understand, but not feel that and sort of take that emotion on from them or be there with them,
yeah,
it's much easier for that child to come out quicker,
yeah,
if you don't see it as a big deal.
yes, yeah.
Like you say, it just takes a bit of practice, doesn't it?
It
But
does, and when you have a child that's panicking, sometimes or often their behaviours can be not what you
yeah,
as a parent would
yeah,
want them to, how they would be behaving. There may be bad language or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Then is not the time to deal with that. That is just, and that doesn't mean that you can never deal with it or address it, but in that moment, that is not the time. Even though it seems like, yes, that's out of order as well. No, just work on calming yourself, keeping yourself calm and working on calming you, and that is going to help you calm them. And then afterwards, that's when you process it in the best way possible.
yeah. I was going to say it comes back to processing it again,
Yeah,
because um, helping that child process the fact that they calmed themselves down,
yeah,
even though they might have had a cuddle with mum, or they might have got into your bed that night because they were scared and they feel like but still it's their thinking, it's their coping skills. They
yeah,
calm themselves down. It's not
yes,
about being next to you. So
yeah,
you want to really hammer home that they did that.
yes,
Don't take their power away. Don't give
no,
yourself the credit. Don't give the bed the credit. Don't give the running
no,
away the credit.
absolutely.
Give them the credit in the way that they were thinking
Yeah,
to keep themselves calm.
yeah,
And then that's planting that seed again, isn't it? If I can
yes,
be calm in mum's bed, I
yeah,
could be calm in maths.
yes,
I've
yeah,
got to,
yeah,
it was me, it was all me. I've got to do exactly the same. So it
yeah,
comes back to helping them build that belief and that confidence in
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
Fantastic. Very good. So 4 key things then.
Mhm.
So you think those were the biggest things that made the difference for you. We have
Yeah.
got a good podcast, haven't we, on helping a child with a panic attack over on our
Yes.
Emetophobia free
Yeah,
podcast. So we'll pop
absolutely.
the link to that, because I think you said you listened to that.
I listened to that so much. There was actually one moment where I was in the car listening to it, and then I went back into the house to sort of help, like, what was it that they say? And but then what I probably didn't do was process it. correctly. And so there may be bits in this podcast that you listen to and think, well, no, I'm not putting on any pressure, or I'm not doing this. But are you processing it? How are you processing it? And I remember when I was going through the Thrive program, with my daughter, I was I would often leave voice notes for our coach saying things. She did this, but this, and but it felt so important to say what hadn't happened or what hadn't gone right. But now I think, well, I once you're thriving, it's very difficult to focus on the negative. It's the other way round, and that feels really lovely when you actually. It's so much easier to focus on what went well, and actually a struggle to think of what didn't go well.
Well, because you're going, this, this went well, and we learned that we need to just do a little bit more work here. So,
Yeah,
and again, that's a good
absolutely.
thing. It's good to know. It's good to have that as a takeaway to move forward,
Yeah,
rather than
absolutely.
a problem that we're lumbered with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. So we'll tag that podcast episode here as well. So that's
Brilliant.
mainly for helping a child. This one's more about from the parent
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Fab. Good. So, any last thoughts? Any little conclusion? What would your main bit of advice be? Would it be hang in there, or you're in the right place? It's a bit of a bumpy road.
All of those things, all of those things, you will get there. You'll get there. It's predictable. You'll get there. And this isn't your fault. Um, I did that a lot. I blamed myself. This isn't your fault, but that doesn't mean that you can't do other things to help. And hopefully, you've managed to take some bits away from today that are going to propel you forward further along your journey. But you're on the journey, and you're on the right journey, and you will get there.
Yeah, and well, anyone listening to this, mums, dads, there's a team of us who are very similar, and hopefully nice, approachable people. So if you fancy,
Absolutely.
a chat or a rant or a
Yeah,
temporary
absolutely.
moan, and then we can help you shift your mindset.
Yeah,
We've probably been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. So please do
absolutely.
reach out, and we'd be happy to offer you a
Happy to
virtual
help.
glass of wine and a
Yeah,
virtual hug and a
yeah,
little bit of
absolutely.
motivation that you can do this.
Yeah, definitely. No, you'll get there.
Fab. Thanks, Chloe. We'll get
Thanks
you on
so much.
another stage. But for
Yeah.
now, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Lucy. Bye.
Bye bye.